Hi, this is Ece Gurler. In this video, we will have a very quick journey from the beginning of art till the end. I know it's going to miss a lot of details, but my purpose here is to give you a gist of the whole art history in an hour or less than an hour. We will see how long it's going to last. If you're ready, hop on. We're gonna go back in time in the art history. So the very first art piece that we have is from 45,000 BC. Of course, it is a cave art. A very first painting is of a pig. Of course, those days, as Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, we were hunting and we were living in caves. So it's not surprising to find a cave art as the first art piece. And they were using plant-based material or sometimes their blood to paint these cave arts. There's also one very famous one, you're gonna remember the hand, and this is also a cave art. These two earliest art pieces are found in Indonesia. I don't know if you know, but I am from Turkey, and there is one more place there from 10,000 BC that you need to know. Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe is the oldest known temple in the world right now. This ancient temple marks the transition between the hunting era to the farming era. And you can see all these historical remnants show that there are pictures of animals that are probably representing their gods, or maybe death or life. These hunting era paintings usually show how many animals they killed, if they won the war, because it's like a battle, right? Like between the animal and the human being. So who won and why they lost, why they won. It's kind of a journal, actually. Between 3500 BC and 30 AD, we have Mesopotamia, Egypt. Egyptian dynasty believed life after death. So you can see art depicting this when they bury their deads. For example, if you look at those famous mummies in the galleries, you will see there are so many artworks next to them. They were buried together with them. It can be artifacts that belongs to the dead person, or it can be jewelry, or it can be an art piece. And that art piece usually shows what the life is going to look like for that person after death. Between 3000 BC and 1200 BC, we have ancient Greek. Ancient Greek civilization had this theme of ocean, and they were also depicting gods now. We can call these days the golden times of the Bronze Age. We can see perfect, human-like sculptures. They represent gods. So in the early stages of art movements, we see hunting, right? Well, the second stage is theism, meaning religious figures, religions come out. So in Egypt and in ancient Greek, we see this religious effect. They are, making the sculptures of their gods, or they were depicting life after death. So all this shows us that now religion was playing a very important role in people's lives. From 900 to 30 BC, we see Hellenistic era. In Hellenistic era, Greek era again, we observe that now proportions are really important. They idealize their gods in the perfect human form. In architecture, we see order and also columns, lots of columns. Have you ever visited Ephesus, or if you visited ever Greece, you know which columns I'm talking about. They also value symmetry and the grid pattern. (735 BC to 337 BC. Between those years, a very well-known empire was in power, Roman Empire. In this era, we see a lot of realism, especially realistic human and animal figures. I had the chance to go to Pantheon in Rome, and it was wonderful. It was, I would say, breathtaking to see inside and learn about the history. Also, I visited Pompeii, which was again south of Italy, and I had an amazing time. All the artwork that I saw there was from this era. From 324 BC to 1453 AD, we have Byzantine Empire. It was a huge empire again, and what we see here is a little bit different. We see, with a little bit of Islamic influence, mosaics. If you go to Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, you will know what I mean. It's the perfect place to see the best architectural example of the Byzantine Empire times. It is so strong that Hagia Sophia is such a strong structure that even though for years it has been exposed to many really high magnitude earthquakes, it's still standing strong. And you can see all these magnificent mosaics inside from this era. It was built in, I think, in 500s in AD, and you can still go and see it today. It's free to enter. Between 622 and 1924, we have Eastern effect. We have Iran, we have China, we have this Islamic effect, and also Far East effect on art. If you look at the beginning date, 622, it is 12 years after Muhammad became the prophet. And also 10 years later, in 632, Muhammad was going to die. Here, the effect that we all see in Iran, in Ottoman Empire, in China, is this miniature. Also, in this era, with this art movement, you see lots of hand-knotted carpets, hand-woven carpets. This Eastern kind of effect on art will also influence Johannes Vermeer much later. Now let's talk about the dark times. Between 410 and 1024 years, we have the Dark Ages meaning Middle Age, meaning medieval times. You're talking about the years of Vikings. There were riots, there were malaria outbreaks, and economy was not good, and the things were not looking good for the world. Those times, the patterns were interwoven to each other. And what we see mostly is the figures that are related to pagan religion, which means most of the time animals. We see some jewelries that were made in the form of an animal. What we see, which is very interesting in this era, is the introduction of shimmer, right? I think it's ironic, and I think this is how art works. Art always is born in the midst of rebellion. And here what we see is during the Dark Ages, let me introduce some shimmer so that we can change what's going wrong. Next, we have Romanesque. During this age, something very important happened. The Crusades. During Crusades, so many people died violently. And you also know that people were suffering from sickness, lack of food, lack of medicine. So again, they were dark times. It especially affected the architecture. If you happen to go to Cappadocia in Turkey, there are so many small churches that were built almost in the mountains from this era. What you see in this era, very thick walls and very tiny windows. I'm thinking maybe Crusades affect this because people were trying to hide, and in order to hide well, you need just tiny windows and thick walls. Between 1140 to 1300s, we have Gothic times. Well, Gothic times, again, art is rebellious, guys. Do you remember I said in Romanesque we have small windows? Now in Gothic times, what happens? Windows get huge and they get color, and on top of that, they get figures. Those times are really, really dark because there was an outbreak of a plague, and the plague affected thousands of cities. Also, France and England were in 100 Years' War. I want to say something about the plague. Did you know one of the reasons why plague became such a pandemic was because during the medieval times they burned a lot of women and cats alive because they thought they were doing witchcraft. So what happened after they burned these women and cats is that there were less cleaning because there were less women. Also, there was poverty, so people were paying less attention to their hygiene. And then suddenly rats evolved and they got more and more. They were multiplying every day in an incredible fast speed because there were no cats to eat them. So I am thinking that maybe during those dark times, architecture went up and the windows got bigger and more colorful because people wanted to breathe, take a break. Between 1200 and 1400, what we see is the last stage of the Middle Ages, last stage of the Gothic. Proto-renaissance means before Renaissance. It emerges in Italy first. This is the time we see for the very first time shadows of human beings in paintings. In Proto-Renaissance, we also see that the colors get more vibrant, and still we are talking about shimmer. The proportions are getting better in the paintings and drawings. Also, we see that they are getting more and more realistic. In this time, we see for the very first time the symbol of being sacred, halos. Now, the buildings are going the opposite. I told you about being rebellion, right? Now they were getting shorter and wider. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. There's always some kind of bright feature in the dark present, right? So what happens once the Middle Ages and Renaissance begins? And Renaissance literally means rebirth, enlightenment. This was part 1. I will see you in part 2, Renaissance and afterwards.